The air in the main biolab of the Harmony 7 station was perfect. It was a constant, slightly cool 21 degrees Celsius with 60% humidity. To Kong Ji-hyun, it felt dead. It lacked the smell of rain on hot pavement, the dry heat of a city breeze, or the damp chill of a mountain morning. Here, the only scents were sterile cleaner and the faint, sweet odor of alien growth medium. Ji-hyun was a patient man. His job as a xenobiologist required it. But the current project was testing his limits. He was not studying strange new life forms today. He was trying to be studied and found acceptable. His companion in the large, garden-like lab was named Era. She was a scholar from the Viridian Entropy, a civilization so ancient they viewed planets like Earth as chaotic, messy nurseries. Era did not look like him. Her body was a slender, graceful pillar of what seemed like smooth, gray-green bark. For delicate, vine-like limbs extended from her torso. Her head was a rounded bud from which soft, blue light pulsed in complex patterns. She communicated through a small device that translated her light and her scent pheromones into galactic common. Their task was simple: catalog the symbiotic relationship between a crystalline fungus and a floating helium sac plant in the station's main observation dome. The work was slow, painfully slow. Every time Ji-hyun moved to take a scan or adjust a sensor, Era would flinch. A sharp smell, like ozone and crushed mint, would fill the space between them. He knew what it meant. It was the Viridian scent for fear, for deep-seated revulsion. To her people, the universe was a story of consumption. Some beings consumed light, some consumed minerals. Animals which consumed other life were seen as violent horrors. Humans, who could and would eat anything from plants to animals, were the worst. They were the ultimate devourers. Unpredictable, terrifying. Ji-hyun tried diplomacy. He spoke softly. He moved with exaggerated slowness. He explained each action before he did it. It did little to help. A break was called. Ji-hyun walked to a clear area of the lab, feeling Era's luminous gaze on his back. His stomach growled. It had been hours. He pulled a standard-issue protein bar from his pocket, tore the wrapper, and took a bite. It tasted like cardboard and peanuts. The reaction was immediate. Era's soft blue light flashed into a bright, panicked white. She took 2 quick steps back, her vine hands trembling. The air was suddenly thick with the scent of ozone and something new, something like rotting flowers. Her translation device emitted a voice, soft and synthesized, but trembling with pure dread. "Do not," it said, the words clear in the quiet lab. "Please, do not devour me, human." Ji-hyun froze, the half-eaten bar in his hand. He felt a strange mix of pity and frustration. He carefully finished chewing and swallowed. He placed the wrapper in a recycler. Then he turned to face her fully, his expression calm. He didn't apologize. He didn't get angry. A slow, understanding smirk touched his lips. It was not a cruel expression, but one of someone seeing a puzzle finally click into place, even if the picture was wrong. "Not like you imagine," he said, his voice steady and low. Era's light pulsed, confused. The fear scent lessened only a fraction. Ji-hyun gestured to the protein bar wrapper. "This is not an act of hunting. It is maintenance, like your people soaking in sunlight. My body needs fuel. This is just fuel. You consume the flesh of other beings," the translated voice stated. A simple, horrific fact. "Sometimes, yes," Ji-hyun admitted, not looking away. "But consumption is not just one thing for us. It is not the end of a story." He searched for the right words. "We also consume ideas. We consume time. We consume stories." He walked over to a terminal on the lab wall. His movements were still slow, but purposeful. Era watched, her bud-like head tilted. Ji-hyun called up a file from the Earth Cultural Archives. He did not show her wars or factories, things the wider galaxy often associated with humans. Instead, he pulled up a video. It was a time-lapse recording from the National Museum of Korea. It showed a restoration lab. In it, a pair of human hands, covered in thin white gloves, worked under a magnifying lamp. The object was a crumbling, centuries-old book of poetry from the Joseon dynasty. The pages were brown and fragile as autumn leaves. The time-lapse sped up. Day after day, the hands worked. They applied tiny brushes, delicate tools, and translucent sheets of repair paper. They consumed hours. They consumed focus and skill. And slowly, page by page, the book was made whole again. The writing, once lost to cracks and tears, became readable. This person, Ji-hyun said, pointing to the screen, is consuming her energy, her knowledge, her time. She is feeding it into this book. Why? To stop the book from being consumed by time. To stop the poems from being eaten by forgetfulness. He looked back at Era. Her light had shifted to a softer, curious lavender. The rotten flower scent was gone. You see only the mouth that eats the bar, Ji-hyun said. I am trying to show you the hands that mend the book. They are the same species. Era was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the gentle hum of the station's life support. Finally, her translator spoke, the tone less fearful, but deeply uncertain. I do not understand this mending. It is a strange consumption, a wasteful one. The energy spent could be used for growth.
Ji-hyun nodded.
I know you don't understand, yet that is why we are here. He glanced at the beautiful, strange garden of crystal and floating bulbs they were meant to study. It was a story written in biology. Era saw it as a thing that was, until it would one day be consumed. Ji-hyun looked at it and saw the hands from the video. He saw something that needed to be preserved, understood, its story saved from being forgotten. The fear was still in the air, but a new thread had been introduced. A question. And for now, for a xenobiologist used to patience, that was enough. The shift after the protein bar incident was subtle, like a change in the wind. Era did not relax, but her fear became a sharp, watchful curiosity. The scent of ozone and rot faded, replaced by a cleaner, more neutral smell like damp stone. Her light pulsed a steady, questioning yellow. Ji-hyun worked carefully. He finished his scans of the crystal fungus, noting how its root-like structures avoided the floating bulb's delicate gas sacs. It was a dance of non-consumption, a perfect viridian ideal. He knew Era was observing him more than the fungus. Your explanation is a theory? Era's translator said suddenly, its soft voice breaking the quiet hum of the lab. A justification. The act of eating remains. You take something that is not you and make it you. This is the core truth. Ji-hyun didn't look up from his scanner. It is a core truth, he agreed. But is it the only one? When your people anchor in rich soil and draw nutrients, you take something that is not you. Is that wrong? It is different. We take from the non-living, from the base matter. We do not end a song to continue our own. And the book? Ji-hyun asked, finally meeting her glowing bud. The hands mending the pages. They ended nothing. They gave their song to save another. Era fell silent. Her light flickered, processing. The concept was a knot she couldn't untie. Consumption was destruction. Preservation was something else. How could one require the other? The station's intercom chimed. Ji-hyun, you're needed in Engineering Bay 3. A small problem with the atmospheric processors for the hybrid dome. It was his friend, Lee Hanul. His voice was calm, but Ji-hyun heard the slight tension underneath. I must go, Ji-hyun said to Era. A system needs maintenance. It is another kind of mending. May I observe? The question was quick, her light brightening. It was not a request born of friendliness. Ji-hyun knew. It was study. She was testing his theory in a new environment. If you wish, he said. Engineering Bay 3 was the opposite of the serene biolab. It was a cavern of gray metal, humming conduits, and the sharp smell of ozone and hot metal. Lee Hanul stood before a large, sealed unit, its access panel open. Wires and fluid lines snaked out. Hanul's face was smudged with grease, his hands moving with quick, sure movements. The scrubber catalyst is degraded, Hanul said, nodding to Ji-hyun and giving Era a brief, polite glance. It's not filtering the nitrogen correctly. If it fails, the gas balance in the dome shifts. The helium plants wilt. The crystal fungus dies. A chain of consumption, Era observed, her translator voice echoing slightly in the bay. Hanul blinked. I suppose you could call it that. A chain of failure. We need to fix it. He handed Ji-hyun a diagnostic pad. I need you to recalibrate the flow regulators while I replace the catalyst matrix. It's a two-person job. For the next hour, Ji-hyun and Hanul worked in a practiced rhythm. They spoke in short, technical sentences. Ji-hyun's world narrowed to numbers on a screen, to the feel of adjustment tools in his hand. He was consuming data and applying focus. Era watched. She saw no mending of beautiful books here. She saw two beings manipulating cold machinery. They were expending energy to fix a machine so it could continue its work of filtering. It seemed circular, practical perhaps, but it did not touch her deeper objection. Then, Hanul grunted. The seal on this new matrix is defective. It's leaking. A faint, harmless but smelly gas began to hiss from a connector. If we don't seal it, the whole unit is useless. We don't have a spare seal this size. Ji-hyun looked around the bay. His eyes landed on a small, personal locker. He walked over, opened it, and pulled out a wrapped packet. It was his lunch brought from Earth. Inside, beside a container of rice, was a small, flat piece of dried seaweed used for wrapping. Will this work? He asked Hanul, holding up the dark green sheet. Hanul took it, felt its flexible, durable texture. A slow smile spread across his face. It's perfect. Better than the factory seal, honestly. Organic, compressible. He quickly cut a circle from the seaweed sheet and fitted it over the leak. The hissing stopped. Ji-hyun returned to his pad, continuing his calibrations as if nothing had happened. Era's light stuttered. The clean scent of damp stone changed, warmed slightly, like sun on wet soil. She had seen it. The human had opened a package of personal fuel, a thing meant to be eaten. But instead of consuming it, he had used it to mend. He had transformed food, the ultimate symbol of crude consumption to her people, into a tool of preservation. The seaweed would never be eaten now. Its value was not in being broken down into energy, but in holding something else together. The work finished. The unit hummed to life, its readings green. The dome's environment was safe. On the walk back to the biolab, Era was quiet. Finally, as they reached the door, her translator spoke. The seaweed. You sacrificed a part of your own sustenance. It was a small part, Ji-hyun said. That is not the point, Era replied, her light swirling in slow blues and purples. The point is the direction. You took a thing meant for your own consumption and directed it outward, to sustain something else. Ji-hyun stopped and looked at her. Yes, we do that. We call it sharing, or sacrifice, or just fixing what's broken. It is a very strange hunger, Era said. Her tone was not accusing now. It was analytical, puzzled. It is a hunger that sometimes gives instead of takes. It is the same hunger, Ji-hyun said softly, opening the lab door. The sweet smell of the hybrid garden wafted out, just aimed differently. He entered the lab, leaving Era in the corridor for a moment. She stood there, her light casting soft patterns on the metal floor. The simple, brutal logic of her world had a new, confusing variable. The devourer was also a repairer. The consumer was also a sustainer. She did not trust him, but she could no longer simply fear him. The puzzle had grown deeper, and against her scholarly nature, she found she wanted to see the final picture. The new understanding was fragile. For 2 days, Ji-hyun and Era worked in a careful silence. The fear scent was gone, but a tense curiosity hung in the air between them. Era watched his every move, not as a potential victim now, but as a scientist observing a baffling natural phenomenon. Ji-hyun was careful. He ate his meals in the crew mess, not in the lab. He focused on the work. They were in the main observation dome, a vast transparent bubble attached to the station. Inside was a miniature world. The ground was a soft, moss-like covering. From it grew the crystalline fungi, their structures throwing rainbow fractures of light. Floating above them were the helium sac plants, bobbing gently like pale, fragile balloons anchored by thin, silver vines. It was beautiful and strange, a dance of two life forms that helped each other without consuming. Jihyun was taking a coarse sample from the moss. Era was recording the light refraction patterns of the crystals. The station's gentle background hum was the only sound. Then the hum changed as a deep, shuddering groan vibrated through the deck plates. It was the sound of metal under immense stress. The dome itself creaked. The floating plants, sensitive to vibration, jerked wildly on their vines. Era's light flashed a brilliant, startled white. The station intercom blared to life, filled with static. All personnel, this is command. We are experiencing severe tectonic shear from the gas giant's tidal forces. It is exceeding safety margins. Proceed to emergency shelters immediately. Repeat, proceed to shelters immediately. Alarm lights began to pulse a harsh red, staining the crystal forest in bloody light. Another shudder, stronger this time. A sharp crack echoed through the dome. Across the chamber, a long fissure split the mossy ground. It raced directly towards the oldest and largest cluster of crystal fungi, a majestic structure that had taken centuries to grow. The ground beneath it was collapsing, threatening to swallow the entire formation and crush the delicate floating plants above. Park Chul, the mission security chief, his face tight with urgency, burst into the dome from the main hatch.
Yihyun.
Move, now. Protocol is clear. We evacuate. The structure is compromised. Jihyun looked from the cracking ground to the ancient crystal cluster. It wasn't just a specimen. It was a library. Its growth patterns held data on solar cycles, atmospheric changes, a history of this little moon written in silicate. Letting it fall into the fissure would be like watching the last copy of a book burn. Era was already moving towards the exit, her light a frantic pulse. She saw Jihyun hesitating. The Devourer consumes, her translator said, the voice flat with resignation. The planet will consume this grove. It is the natural order. Jihyun ignored her. He tapped the comm on his wrist. Hanul, are you hearing this? The main dome is splitting. The primary crystal cluster is about to go. Hanul's voice came back, calm but fast. I see it on structural sensors. The support frame under that section is buckling. The station's stabilizers can't counteract this much shear. We have to leave it. Can we buy it 30 minutes? Jihyun asked, his eyes fixed on the widening crack. If the shear passes, the structure might hold. That's not protocol. Jihyun? Park Chul snapped, grabbing his arm. 30 minutes? Hanul? Jihyun repeated, shaking off Chul's grip. There was a pause filled with the sound of groaning metal. Then Hanul sighed. I can redirect auxiliary power to the local stabilizers. There's a patch. It might hold for a bit if the shear lessens. But someone needs to manually shore up the subframe where it's bending. It's in the maintenance crawl space under the dome floor. It's dangerous. If it goes while you're down there, send me the schematic, Jihyun said, already moving towards a service hatch in the dome wall. You are not consuming. Era's voice stopped him. She had not left. She stood by the hatch, her light swirling in confused patterns. You are expending. You are risking your song for a data point. Jihyun yanked the service hatch open. A gust of cold, mechanical-smelling air blew out. It's not a data point, he said, his voice hard. It's a story, and no one gets to finish a story before it's been read. He climbed into the dark hole. Below the dome was a cramped world of pipes, conduits, and structural beams. The red alarm lights flashed through gaps in the flooring above, creating a hellish strobe. The shuddering was worse here, a constant, jarring vibration. Dust and bits of moss rained down. Jihyun crawled on his hands and knees, following the guidance on his wrist pad that he found the problem. A massive support beam, stressed by the planetary shear, had twisted out of its housing. It was seconds away from snapping. If it did, a whole section of the dome floor would collapse. That he braced his back against a cold pipe and planted his feet against the beam. He pushed with all his strength. His muscles burned. The beam groaned, metal screaming against metal. It was a contest of strength between a human and a planet. Above, He could hear Park Chul shouting into his comm, he could hear Hanul's tense updates. And then he heard a new sound, a soft shuffling. Era's slender, vine-like limb reached down into the crawl space. It was not strong, but it wrapped around a smaller, secondary strut, pulling it towards the bent beam. Direct your force here, her translator voice echoed in the cramped space. She was using the strut as a lever. With her guidance, Jihyun adjusted his position. He pushed again. With a final, deafening screech, the beam slid back into its housing with a solid clunk. The violent shuddering in that immediate area lessened to a manageable tremble. Jihyun slumped, panting. His hands were cut and bleeding from the sharp metal edges. He looked up at Era's glowing bud peering down from the hatch. Her light was a steady, warm amber, like a lantern in the dark. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "I observed," she replied. "You consumed danger. You consumed injury. You fed it to the structure to keep it whole." She paused, her light dimming slightly. "This is not the hunger of a devourer. This is a different metabolism." The station-wide shudder began to subside. The tidal shear was passing. Together, they climbed out of the crawl space. The red alarm lights switched off, replaced by the normal, soft illumination. The crack in the ground had stopped just short of the ancient crystal cluster. The grove was saved. Park Chul stared at them, his expression unreadable. Hanul's voice came over the comm, relieved. "Stabilizers holding. Good work, you two." Jihyun looked at his bleeding hands, then at the untouched, beautiful crystal garden. He had fed it his effort, his risk. He had consumed so it would not be consumed. Era stood beside him, her scent now one of warm soil after a rain, and something else, something sharp and green like curiosity taking root. The medical bay was quiet. The only sounds were the soft beep of a scanner and the distant, normal hum of the station. Jihyun sat on a clean, white bed, letting the tissue welder seal the cuts on his hands. The machine hummed, making his skin itch as it worked. Park Chul stood by the door, his arms crossed. He had said nothing since leading them there. The door slid open, and Lee Hanul walked in. He held a small, flat box. He nodded to Park Chul, then looked at Jihyun's hands. "The structural report is good," Hanul said. "Your 30-minute patch held. The beam is secure. The grove is fine. Command is unhappy about the breach of safety protocol. But the result is good." Park Chul finally spoke. "The result was luck. You risked 2 lives for a cluster of rocks." "It was a calculated risk," Jihyun said calmly. The welder finished with a final beep. He flexed his fingers. The skin was new and pink. "Calculated by who?" Park Chul asked. He looked at Hanul. "By engineering? Or by a feeling?" Before Hanul could answer, the door opened again. Era stood in the doorway, her light a muted, steady green. She moved into the room, the clean medical scent mixing with her own earthy odor. She held a small, translucent pod in one vine-like hand. She stopped a few steps from Jihyun's bed. Park Chul tensed, but Hanul gave a small shake of his head. "Your efficiency is impaired," Era's translator stated. She extended the pod. It was filled with a thick, amber gel. "This is a nutrient resin. My people produce it. It aids cellular repair. For us, it was an offering, not an apology, but a continuation of her observation. She was providing fuel, the very thing she feared, to see what he would do with it. Jihyun took the pod carefully. It was cool and smooth. "Thank you." He broke the seal and swallowed the gel. It tasted of honey and clean water. "You consume it," Era noted, her light pulsing softly. "It is offered to help, so I accept the help," Jihyun said. "This is how the mending works. Sometimes you are the hands. Sometimes you are the book." Park Chul made a low sound of frustration and left the room. Hanul watched, a thoughtful look on his face. Era's light shifted to a curious blue. "On the planet's surface, you said you consumed risk to save the grove. The data point was the expenditure of your own physical integrity worth one more piece of information." Jihyun was quiet for a moment. He looked at his healed hands. Then he reached for his personal data pad, which was on a table next to the bed. He pulled up a file. It was not a scientific document. It was a simple photo. He turned the pad so Era could see. The photo showed an old woman with a kind, wrinkled face. She sat at a small table in a room filled with light from a large window. Behind her were shelves, but they were not filled with books. They were filled with thousands of small, white cards, stacked in neat rows. Some were in clear plastic sleeves. The woman was looking at the camera with a warm smile, holding one of the cards in her hand. "This is my grandmother," Ji-hyun said, his voice softer now.
Kim So-yun.
She lived in a small apartment in the city of Busan, by the sea. "What are the cards?" Era asked. "They are recipes, instructions for making food. But they are more than that." He zoomed in on one card. The writing was in graceful, old-fashioned Korean script. In the margins were small notes. "Jong's favorite. Add less salt next time. Perfect for a rainy day. Made this when Hee-won was born." For over 60 years, Ji-hyun explained, she did this. Whenever she made a dish or learned one from a friend, or remembered one from her own mother, she wrote it down. She collected the taste, the memory, the story of that moment on a card. She consumed all those moments. The joy, the sadness, the ordinary days. She fed them to these cards. He looked at Era. Her light was a steady, focused glow. When she died, Ji-hyun continued. She did not take those recipes with her. She left them. She fed them to me and to my cousins. Now, when I make the stew she wrote about here, he pointed to a card. I am not just eating. I am consuming her memory, her care, her day in a kitchen 30 years ago. It is not gone. It is here. He tapped his chest. And it is here. He pointed to the pad. He put the pad down. The crystal grove out there. Its growth patterns are a recipe written by sunlight and gravity and time. Tells the story of this place. Letting it be destroyed would be like burning my grandmother's cards. The story would be eaten by forgetfulness. So yes, a few cuts on my hands were worth it. To be the hands that mend. To keep the story from being devoured. The medical bay was silent. Hanul had a small, understanding smile on his face. He looked at Era. Era stood perfectly still. Her light moved in slow, complex patterns like thoughts turning over. The scent of warm soil filled the room. The image of the human as a mere consumer was now shattered completely. She saw a being of layers. A being that could take in food, risk, memory, and even loss and transform them. Not into simple energy for itself, but into something that lasted. Into meaning. Into a gift for the future. Your consumption, she said slowly, her translator voice almost a whisper, is not an end. It is a bridge. You take something in one moment, and you carry it to another moment. You are a bridge for stories.
Ji-hyun nodded.
That is a good way to say it. It is a strange and inefficient biology, Era said, but the old judgment was gone. It was replaced by a scholar's awe for a baffling new principle. You are fragile. You bleed. You forget. But you fight this fragility by building bridges of memory. You use your own hunger to fight a bigger hunger. The hunger of time. She turned and walked to the door. She stopped and looked back, her light a soft, respectful yellow. I must think about this bridge, she said. Then she left. Hanul let out a long breath. Well, that was something. Ji-hyun looked at the photo of his grandmother one more time before shutting off the pad. His hands no longer hurt. He felt a different kind of warmth. He had not just saved a grove of crystals. He had, perhaps, planted a seed of understanding in a mind that saw the universe very differently. And for a bridge builder, that was the whole point. For a day, the station returned to normal. The tectonic stresses had settled. Ji-hyun and Era resumed their work in the observation dome. The ancient crystal cluster stood untouched, a silent monument to their shared effort. The air between them was different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a focused, mutual curiosity. Era's light was often a thoughtful, steady blue. She asked more questions not about biology, but about human ideas. About bridges. Jihyun was explaining the concept of a library when the alarm sounded again. This time, it was not a deep shudder, but a sharp, urgent series of beeps from the bioscanners in the dome itself. Era was closest to the main console. Her light flashed to a bright, analytical white as she read the data. A blight, her translator announced, the voice calm but serious. Microbial. It is attacking the foundational lichen on the moss bed. The lichen is what stabilizes the soil and provides base nutrients. Without it, the moss dies. Then the crystal roots have no anchor. Then the helium plants have no partnership. A chain collapse. Jihyun was at her side in seconds. The scanner screen showed a terrifying time-lapse prediction. A spreading wave of gray, eating the vibrant green and purple lichen. The collapse of the entire dome ecosystem within 72 hours. Source. Jihyun asked, his mind already racing through solutions. The tectonic event, Era said. It must have fractured a deep rock layer, releasing dormant spores. They are highly consumptive. They are simple. They eat, then they die. It is a natural cycle. Jihyun looked at her. A natural cycle that will destroy everything you came here to study. Yes, Era said, her light dimming to a sad, accepting gray. It is consumption. It is the way of things. We will record the collapse. It is valuable data on endings. Jihyun stared at her. He understood now. To the Viridian entropy, this was like a forest fire. Tragic but natural. They would observe and learn from the destruction. They would not interfere. To interfere in consumption was against their deepest philosophy. No, Jihyun said simply. Era's light pulsed, confused. No. We are not here to record an ending, he said, turning back to the screen. He tapped his comm. Hanul Yuminji, Park Chul. We have a problem in the main dome. I need everyone in the biolab. Now. Minutes later, the small team stood around the main lab terminal, looking at the blight data. Park Chul was stern. Yuminji, the cultural analyst, looked worried. Hanul was already running simulations on a separate screen. The Viridian protocol is clear, Park Chul said. We are observers. We do not interfere in planetary processes. This is their research site. It is also our research site, Jihyun countered. And we do not observe endings when we can prevent them. That is our protocol. How? Yuminji asked. A targeted fungicide would kill the lichen too. It's all intertwined. Hanul spoke without looking up from his screen. We don't fight it with a poison. We fight it with a better eater. Everyone turned to him. Era's light became a tight, focused beam on Hanul. Explain, Jihyun said. The blight is a consumer, right? A dumb, hungry one. Hanul pulled up a complex molecular model. I've been cross-referencing our Earth fungal databases with the blight structure. We can't kill it, but we can design a phage, a virus. It's a very, very specific kind of consumer. It would attach to the blight microbe, use it to replicate, and in doing so, break it apart. It would consume the consumer. Once the blight is gone, the phage has no host. It goes dormant. It becomes inert dust. The room was silent. Park Chul frowned. Yuminji's eyes were wide. Era took a step forward. Her scent filled the room, not of fear, but of something shocked and cold, like frozen earth. You propose to fight consumption with a more clever consumption? Yes, Jihyun said, the idea clicking into place. He looked at Era, his expression intense. You see only one kind of hunger, a blind hunger that destroys. We are proposing a guided hunger. Precise one. We use a small, controlled hunger to eliminate a big, wild one. We don't destroy the system. We edit it. It is manipulation, Era said, her light trembling. It is playing with the natural order. It is gardening, Yuminji said softly. Everyone looked at her. She shrugged. On Earth, for thousands of years, we did not just watch plants grow. We guided them. We took wild, hungry things and shaped them. We consumed the work to make something better. This is the same. It is using one part of nature to care for another part. Era was silent, her light swirling in conflicted patterns. The idea was a shock to her entire worldview. It was not peaceful observation. It was not simple, brutal consumption. It was something in between. Something active and clever. Can you do it? Jihyun asked Hanul. The station's bioprinter can synthesize the phage design. It's risky. If the phage mutates, it could attack the lichen. But the probability is low. Very low. Park Chul shook his head. The Viridian authorities will never allow it. They don't have to know the details, Jihyun said, a plan forming. We are conducting emergency conservation measures to stabilize the research environment. That is within our agreement. He looked at Era. She was the key. She was the official Viridian observer. Her report could stop everything. Era, he said, his voice calm but firm. You asked me about bridges. This is a bridge. The blight only consumes. It only destroys. It builds nothing. This phage, it consumes to save. It consumes to build a future for that grove. It is a tool. Like the seaweed was a tool. Like my hands were a tool. Which hunger serves life better? The mindless one, or the one that chooses to mend? Era looked from the screen, showing the spreading gray death, to Jihyun's determined face, to Hanul's waiting expression. She thought of the crystal grove of the story written in silicate. She thought of the grandmother's recipe cards. Bridges across time, her light steadied into a clear, decisive green. The scent of frozen earth warmed, just a little. I will observe, she said finally. I will record the application of this guided hunger. I will document if it builds, or if it merely consumes in a new way. It was not permission, but it was not a refusal. It was a chance. Jihyun nodded. That's all we ask. Hanul, start the synthesis. We have a consumer to outsmart. The main biolab felt like the calm before a storm. The air was still, the usual gentle hum of equipment now sounding too loud. On the central table, inside a sealed glass cylinder, was the solution. It looked like nothing. A fine, grayish dust. Hanul's phage. The guided hunger. Era stood at a respectful distance, her light a constant, recording white. Her scent was neutral, the smell of a clean room. She was observing, as promised. Park Chul watched from the doorway, his jaw tight. He had argued with command, but Jihyun's status and Hanul's confidence had won a narrow approval. It was a human operation now. The risk was theirs. Yu Minji worked at a terminal monitoring the dome's life signs. The blight has consumed 18% of the primary lichen bed, she said, her voice quiet. The crystal roots in Sector 4 are already showing stress. It's time, Hanul said. He looked at Jihyun. The dispersal unit is ready. It will aerosolize the phage. The air circulation in the dome will do the rest. Jihyun picked up the sealed cylinder. It was lighter than he expected. He thought of his grandmother's recipe cards. A pinch of spice could change an entire dish. This was a pinch of calculated life, meant to change an entire world. I will do it, he said as he walked to the observation dome, the others following. The dome was still beautiful, but now he could see the sickness. Patches of the moss bed were turning a dull, lifeless gray. The vibrant purple and green lichen was being eaten away, like ink fading from a page. He went to the central dispersal unit, a small nozzle on a tall stand. With careful hands, he opened the cylinder and poured the gray dust into the unit's chamber. He sealed it. Beginning dispersal, Hanul said, his fingers flying over a control pad. Fan speed low. Wide dispersion. A soft hiss filled the quiet dome. A fine, almost invisible mist sprayed from the nozzle. It was carried by the gentle, artificial breezes. It settled over the gray patches, over the green lichen, over the crystal flowers. Nothing happened. For a full hour, nothing happened. They watched the scanners. The blight's progress had paused, but it had not reversed. Park Chul let out a slow breath. A waste of time. It needs time to attach, to replicate, Hanul said. But even he sounded less sure. Era's light was a steady, unreadable white. She was a statue of observation. Jihyun did not move from the scanner screen. He watched the microscopic readouts. The phage was there. It was meeting the blight. The battle was too small to see, happening on a scale of molecules. Then Yuminji leaned forward. Look, Sector 7. The gray area, it's not spreading. It's changing. On the visual feed, the dull gray patch began to darken. Not to healthy green, but to a dry, brownish black. It was the color of something dead and spent. The phage is working, Hanul whispered, a grin spreading on his face. It's consuming the blight, breaking it down into inert compounds. Look at the molecular breakdown. The data stream confirmed it. The aggressive, consumptive signature of the blight was disappearing from the scan. In its place was simple, dead organic material. Fertilizer. Slowly, like a shadow retreating from the sun, the gray death began to shrink. From the edges of each patch, the vibrant colors of the healthy lichen became visible again. It was not regrowing yet, but it was no longer being eaten. Era moved. She stepped closer to the moss bed, near a shrinking patch of blight. She extended a slender vine. She did not touch the moss. Instead, she held it above the area, her light shifting from white to a deep, scanning violet. She was studying the aftermath. The scent in the dome changed. The clean, neutral smell from her was replaced by something new. A sharp, green scent, like a crushed stem of a strong herb. It was the smell of intense, overwhelming realization. She turned to face them. Her light was no longer a recording white. It was a swirling storm of colors, blue, green, gold. It is true, her translator said, the voice filled with a kind of awe she had never shown before. The guided hunger consumed the wild hunger. It ate the eater, and then it stopped. It left the rest. It did not turn on the lichen. It was precise. It was a tool. She looked at Jihyun, her light focusing on him. You did not fight consumption. You did not deny the nature of things. You directed it. You gave it a purpose. A small, sharp purpose that served a larger whole.
Yihyun nodded.
We used a small truth to protect a bigger truth. The truth of the Grove's story. Era stood there for a long time, looking at the recovering moss, then at the majestic, saved crystal cluster in the distance. Her light settled into a slow, rhythmic pulse of deep green and gold. My people see consumption as an end, a final, dark truth. She paused, the scents around her shifting again, warming. But this shows it can be a middle, a step. You consumed the blight to save the lichen. You consumed the risk to save the crystals. You consume memory to save love. She looked at him. Your entire species. You are not devourers. You are digesters. You take in the raw, the dangerous, the broken, the lost, and you transform it. You do not just end things. You change their form into something that can be used, into something that can build. The word hung in the air. Digesters. It was not a gentle word, but it was an accurate one. It spoke of process, not just of ending. Park Chul was silent, his earlier frustration gone, replaced by thoughtful respect. Yuminji was smiling. Hanul looked proud. The scanners continued to show the blight retreating. The dome's ecosystem was stabilizing. The story written in crystal and lichen would continue. Era walked over to Jihyun. Her light was calm now, a soft, steady gold. I must speak to my superiors, she said. I must tell them they are wrong. They see the mouth that eats the bar. They do not see the hands that mend the book. They do not see the mind that guides the hunger. I will make them see. For the first time, her vine-like limb reached out, not in fear, but in a gesture of shared purpose. She gently touched the dispersal unit, the tool that had delivered the guided hunger. You have shown me a new metabolism, she said, a metabolism of the mind. Thank you. The crisis was over. But in the quiet dome, something much bigger had just begun. An idea had been planted, and unlike the blight, this one was meant to grow. The final day on the Harmony 7 station was filled with a quiet, busy calm. The blight was gone. The Crystal Grove stood safe, its story secure. The official reports had been filed. The human team was preparing to leave. In the main concourse, a formal farewell gathering was held. Station officials and the few other alien researchers were there. It was a standard event. Polite words were spoken in Galactic Common. Digital records of the joint research were exchanged. It was all very correct and very cold. Ji-hyun stood with his team. Park Chul looked professional and relieved. Yu Minji was already thinking of her cultural report. Lee Hanul was checking his wrist pad for ship departure times. It was a job well done, and now it was over. Then Era stepped forward. She moved to the center of the space. Her light, usually so controlled, was pulsing in a soft, warm rhythm of green and gold. The scent around her was not of ceremony, but of rich, living soil and sun-warmed bark. She faced the human contingent. She held a small, organic-looking pod in her vine-like hands. It was the color of dusk, with faint, slow-moving lights inside it, like captured stars. Kang Ji-hyun, her translator said, her voice clear in the quiet room. Our agreement was for the exchange of data. That has been fulfilled. But there is another exchange. One for you personally. She offered him the pod. He took it carefully. It was warm to the touch, and he could feel a gentle, soothing vibration from within. This is a spore sac from the oldest forests of my homeworld, Era explained. When placed in soil and given water, it will grow. It will not produce fruit or flowers for you to eat. It will grow into a plant that seeks vibration, sound, consumes discord, loud noises, harsh frequencies. It turns them into silence, and in that silence, it emits a frequency that brings calm to a mind. It is a consumer of chaos. Ji-hyun held the living gift. He understood. It was a perfect mirror. She was giving him a piece of her world's nature, not as a resource to be devoured, but as a tool, a guided consumer of noise, a mend for the mind. It is remarkable, Ji-hyun said, truly touched. Thank you. Now it was his turn. He reached into a bag at his feet. He did not pull out a data crystal with official reports. Instead, he pulled out a small, simple storage device, the kind used for personal files. He handed it to Era. And this, for you, he said. She took it, her light blinking in inquiry. It is not the mission data, Ji-hyun explained. That is already sent. This is the digital archive of my grandmother's recipe cards. Every card, every note in her handwriting, every stain from her kitchen. It has been translated into Galactic Common. It is a record of a human hunger. A hunger for taste, for memory, for family. It is a hunger that wanted to feed the future. Era went very still. The pod in Ji-hyun's hands seemed to pulse in time with the lights in her own body. She held the small device as if it were the most precious thing in the galaxy. In a way, it was the blueprint of a human bridge. You give me your grandmother's consumption, she said, her voice whisper-soft through the translator. I give you the story of what we can build with what we take in, he corrected gently. Around them, the formal event continued, but for Ji-hyun and Era, the room had faded away. The exchange was complete. Not between a human and an alien, but between a bridge builder and a scholar who had learned to see the architecture. Later, as the human shuttle prepared to depart, Era stood at a large observation window. She watched the small craft detach from the station. Her personal data pad was in her hand. On its screen was a single recipe card. It was for a simple Korean potato stew. The notes in the margin, now translated, read, "Made this on a cold day. The house smelled good for hours." She looked from the words to the retreating shuttle, a tiny star moving against the vast, dark blanket of space. The galaxy was full of species that feared humanity. They saw the omnivores, the relentless builders, the chaotic force. They saw the mouth. But Era now saw the hands. She saw the mind that could look at a destructive hunger and design a smarter one to stop it. She saw the heart that could consume a lifetime of memories and offer them as a gift. Humans were not mere devourers. They were alchemists. They took the base material of the universe, risk, time, loss, even fear, and through the strange fire of their spirit, they transformed it. Into mending, into art, into legacy, into quiet. The shuttle carrying the alchemists vanished into the darkness, heading home. Era turned from the window. She had reports to write. They would not be easy. Her people would be skeptical. But she had the evidence. She had the story of the Crystal Grove. She had the recipe for potato stew. She would tell them about the hunger that gives, the consumption that preserves. She would tell them that the most terrifying species in the galaxy might also be the best hope for saving all the stories yet to be written. And it all started with a protein bar, a whispered plea, and a smirk that promised, "Not like you imagine."